We've had an exciting first half of the day, and we're looking forward to a second group of panels, with the first speaker being Danuta Jackiewicz, who is the curator of collections at the National Museum here in Warsaw, which is hosting us today. And she oversees here the areas of photography, iconography, and manuscripts, and has done so since 1995. Her work with these collections has led to research, promotion, and the expansion of the collection, and the organization of a number of exhibitions, including one in 2009 with all of the collections, photography as organized in all of the collections here at the National Museum in a collection catalog, which coincided with the 170th anniversary of the history of photography. The National Museum made its first acquisition of photographs in 1863 and has continued to collect continuously since then, with the photographs being dispersed throughout various collections throughout the museum. And that is what Danuta will tell us about today.
Szanowni Państwo, witam bardzo serdecznie.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am very glad that we can discuss issues of photography with such an exceptional group. I thank the audience for coming, and I thank our special guests from all the museums that have been collecting and exhibiting photography for so many years. Our museum is in a slightly different situation because even though we have a very interesting collection of photographic works, we are still waiting to have the opportunity to actually show what we want in a way that we would want to do it. But hopefully the time of photography at the National Museum is approaching, and I will discuss that for a while. The National Museum in Warsaw is active for 200 years. It was officially founded in 1862. Then it was called the Museum of Fine Arts. That was in the times of the Kingdom of Poland, which was under personal union with the Empire of Russia, which led to specific negative consequences for the Poles. This photo shows the Catholic Church at Ulica Długa, which was transformed into a Russian Orthodox church. So that bears witness to what tended to happen in those days. This is the photograph of Karol Mayer, one of the pioneers of Polish photography. The restitution of an independent Polish state after World War I led to a change of the name of the museum. It ceased to be known as the Museum of Fine Arts, and now it was called the National Museum in Warsaw. There was a strong social pressure to have that word, national, being part of the name. And together with the plaque, new expectations came. The collections were to reflect not only broadly understood Polish culture, but also the country's complex history. Society was ready to donate, and as of 1916, the museum was inundated with collections, memorials, monuments, keepsakes, which reflected all kinds of aspects, including history, architecture, archaeology, and others. That just gives you a glimpse of how diverse the collection is. In 1917, or 1906, sorry, the museum was located at Podwale. The building still exists. That was, sorry, 1919. Then our inventory was 26,000 items strong, and in 1938, just before the war, the last inventory numbered 165,000 items. In 1938, the National Museum opened a new modernist building, which was shared with the Museum of the Polish Army or Polish Armed Forces. This is the case even today because this building contains one more museum apart from ours. In the 1930s, it was thought that this building will be functional and spacious enough. Nonetheless, after World War II, this museum was taken out from under the management of the city of Warsaw. It became a directly state-run structure and became a central museum of Poland. In that case, we started to take over collections from other museums, but also private collections. In further years, new collections were formed, collections of painting, sculpture, graphics, posters, and industrial design. Currently, about 830,000 items is certainly a wealth of collections or collectors' wealth, but it also leads to the downside, which is the lack of adequate space or adequate capacity. We need a new building. The National Museum of Warsaw is the only one of its kind in Poland which has collected items starting from antiquity or dating back to antiquity. Now I'm going to show you photographs performed by Paweł Żak in various galleries of our museum before its change. This is a photo taken in 2011, shot within the project A Photographer at the Museum. However, this project was later discontinued. Now, this is the only museum which has items starting or dating back to antiquity and reaching up to 2013. That was a photo taken this year. All kinds of types of art, painting, sculpture, industrial design. We have the leading collection in Poland in that aspect. Medieval monuments, and all this forms a fierce competition for photography. Additionally to that, we have manuscripts and documents and material culture items and decorative art in our vaults. Photography forms about 10% of all our collections, and it is a branch that takes in the largest number of new items in recent years. So we should call it not a collection, more an inventory, but it illustrates, it does not depreciate its value, it just illustrates how we specifically collected or acquired certain items. Frequently they are collections which were formed outside our institution. Here you see a fragment of a flyer for the most important hitherto exhibition. It was over 1,000 photographs that we selected from our inventory. It was on the 170th anniversary of the invention of photography. So the exhibition was called Light Sensitive. The museum would either accept donations or purchase private collections which were collected according to some scenario drawn up by the collector's author, or the collection's author. And the continuity of techniques is shown. There may also be photographs shot by the inventors or many other exceptionally great photographers, authors, but there are also surprises such as calotype collections. That leads to certain problems for us. This may be a calotype by Giovanni Caneva. Other calotypes of his have already been attributed to him successfully, so it's sometimes surprising, on other occasions frustrating, because we do not find in them the names of authors that we would love to have, like a daguerreotype from the great exhibition in London, which was discussed at length today, the one of 1851. We do not have it in our collection, but we revere it. We do have a lot from the 19th century, but not very much from the 20 years between the world wars. So for the past 2 decades, we have adopted a strategy of activity which was subservient to the housing conditions that we have and the constrained budget that we have. The lack of storage capacity or even exhibition capacity that would be devoted to photography exclusively. The collection of photography at the National Museum has a truly historical character to it, because the first 4 prints were already entered into the inventory book in 1863, and we see portraits by Karol Beyer. They had numbers 45 to 48, and they were entered amongst masters of European painting. Karol Beyer was the author of these prints. They were made on order, not on order of the museum itself, but the supervisor, the director of the government committee of religion and national education. He commissioned the portraits of the 2 most important, let's say, civil servants in the Kingdom of Poland. That was the Viceroy, and Alexander Wielopolski, who was the head of the then government, and also the hall of the Warsaw University, which exists until this day. In those days, it was supposed to be an exhibition hall for the Museum of Fine Arts. 4 prints, unsigned prints from Karol Bayer's photo lab start our collection. A very low-key start, but the initiative of ordering these photographs notably came from outside of the museum, and the traditional technique of painting was not selected. It was photography that had the upper hand, and it happened during the January uprising of 1863, and these photographs were shot by a contesting individual who took politically incorrect photos during martial law that was imposed, and he was even imprisoned, but he still was the one who was called upon to take these photos. The first purchase these are more of Karol Bayer's prints to document. Those are 1860, dated back to 1861. They were published in French press as an illustration of martial law in Poland. Another 133 photos were accepted from Cyprian Lachnicki, who was a collector and a photographer, amateur. His collection especially was composed of photographs of works of art, but also landscapes were an important part of his donation. Di Giovanni calotypes and Gustave Le Gray's views of the Mediterranean. Lachnicki's collection was not the first Polish collection of photographs kept for their aesthetic valor. The search for artistic beauty was also directed towards photographs, but this was the first one that found its way to our inventory, and it was written into the inventory ledger next to paintings by masters. However, nobody paid attention to it, and it was just stored in files. And the next, chronologically, the first Polish collection of photography was created by Józef Ignacy Kraszewski, a writer of the period, something like the Polish Scot of the time. He was fascinated with the invention of photography, and they were sent to him by Karol Bayer of Warsaw. And here we have photographs taken in a village near to Warsaw, but we also have works of Józef Sobkiewicz from Żytomierz, who was indulging in photography in Żytomierz, which was then the Empire of Russia, currently Ukraine, and also Józef Kordysz from Kamieniec-Podolski, then Russia, currently Ukraine, and they were also part of the collection of photography created by Józef Kraszewski. Kraszewski included his prints together with reproductions of works of fine art and connected them together with drawings, cartoons, etc., which he called Collection Iconographique Polonaise. Thus, he tried to provide subject matter or theme key to the understanding, to the systematization of the knowledge of art. Leopold Meyer, a lawyer, also tried to order his photography collection, and he had over 2,000 items which he donated to the museum in his testament in 1915. He had grouped these subjects into Warsawiana, into memorabilia from or related to Polish poets like Juliusz Słowacki, Adam Mickiewicz. We have here members of family, and we also have photographs showing architecture, architecture on the territories being part of Poland before its partition, started the iconographic archive, later known as the iconographic and photographic collection. In that way, the collection donated by Meyer together with other collectors' donations, were divided in that archive into subjects such as city halls, manors, churches, interiors, or city panoramas, town panoramas. Apart from that, after World War II, part of that was transferred to the Historical Museum and to the Literature Museum, thus dispersing the historical collections which initially were stored in this building. We are currently trying to restore the prior inventory in order to have the most comprehensive evaluation, most interesting evaluation of Polish photography collections, and that is important for the anthropology of culture.
In 1916, the museum received the first donation, received directly from a photographer whose picture is visible here, Stanisław Nowak-Słowiński. This was the a report from the operations of a Warsaw-based hospital during World War I, and what was donated was negatives on glass, which are still in our collection, and this was the first ever donation coming from a photographer. Such donations were very readily received in the interwar period, even if they were not numerous. Moreover, the museum started buying photographs, and in 1920, the National Museum, procured from the Vilnius-born photographer Jakub Ucha. He was staying in Warsaw back then because of the Polish Bolshevik War, and he was taking pictures of Warsaw. Another cycle that depicted the developments of the Polish-Soviet War of 1920 is the one that you can see right now. These were the pictures shot by the photo agency, so also agencies were providing their resources to the museum. As you can see, it was the museum's ambition to present also the present day works of art, like the women volunteer marching out to fight the Soviets and other developments coming from the First World War. Here was the civic initiative run by the Polish Civic Committee, helping those mostly affected to survive the difficult war years. I have been just invited to be more brief. There are just 2 minutes time left for me, so I have probably been speaking too long, and just very briefly now let me highlight to you that in our resources, thanks to the active operations of Irena Jakimowicz in the 1960s and 1970s, we could gain access to the works of Kazimierz Podsadecki or heliographies of the prominent artist Karol Hiller. They are still available in the section of modern prints, and they have always been seen and treated as works of art. Our first exhibition of photography in 1960 was to highlight the fact that we had in our resources photographs and we want to exhibit them. Well, back then we showed Polish photographs of the 19th century, then perceptions of Vilnius photographs, and we have a very rich collection of photographs coming from the town of Vilnius. The collection of negatives that were donated by families of Wiesław Brażów and Jan Kosilewski, excellent Polish photographers who worked for Świat, the illustrated daily and weekly, and we were allowed to present those two collections to the wider public. And finally, Janusz Przewłocki, who was who ran a chronicle of all the problems of the Polish aristocracy and gentry of the 19th and the 20th century. Now we are on the eve of a very momentous occasion, very important initiative, the time for photography. Well, the intention of the management of the National Museum to create a new department dedicated to photography and photography alone, well, this will be achieved in reality, and even if we do not have a separate building to house our resources, photographic resources, it is going to be separated. We are considering in great depth what kind of shape the new museum should take. The collection of the photographs of the 21st century will be also a very important feature in this department, because we need to capture the day, speak about what is happening in the present day photography, and record for the future the most interesting phenomena, which is very interesting and very inspiring, because this will allow us to discuss your experiences with you, ladies and gentlemen, who come from the museums, who have long-standing traditions in photography. So we'll welcome any of your inspirations. Thank you. Thank you very much.